Welcome to Raw Revelation, Truth versus Tradition Edition. Today's topic, Valentine's Day. What are we celebrating? Love or marketing? Tracing the origins, the symbolism, and the question most believers never stop to ask.
You know how it is. Every year, February rolls around, and it's like we're all caught up in this rhythm, this cultural script we all just know by heart. But have you ever really stopped to ask yourself, where did this script even come from? First up, the cards. They're everywhere, right? And we all do it. We walk down the aisles looking for the perfect pre-written words to say what we feel or, what we think we're supposed to feel. And then, of course, there are the flowers. It's got to be a certain type, a certain color. It's all part of this unspoken performance we do every year. It's almost automatic. Yeah, it's all just part of the script. The dinner reservations, the chocolate, the perfectly staged social media posts. We just call it tradition, and we don't really think about it. But that brings us to the big question, the one most of us never really stop to ask. Who wrote this script? Who came up with all this? Because let me tell you, when you start digging into the history of Valentine's Day, you find out it's not nearly as simple or as sweet as that heart-shaped box of chocolates would have you believe. Okay, so to figure out who wrote the script, we've got to start with the version we all know today, the modern performance of Valentine's Day. So on the surface, it's presented as this totally harmless, familiar thing, right? A day for romance, for appreciation, for expressing love. But there's another layer to it, that quiet, creeping social pressure that builds up. And that pressure has a clear message, an unspoken demand that really drives the whole thing. If you love someone, you have to prove it. If you care, you have to show it. And how do you show it? Usually by buying something. Suddenly, love isn't just a feeling, it's a public performance. And this is where we hit our first big truth versus tradition moment. Because if you look back at historical Christian practice, there's nothing. No command, no example, no instruction to have a special day for romance in February. Look, the question isn't whether love is a good thing. Of course it is. The real question is, where did this particular way of celebrating it come from? To get that answer, we need to jump in our time machine, because the journey from a 3rd century Roman martyr to this huge commercial holiday we have today, it happened in stages. So let's break it down. All right, our first stop is ancient Rome. And what's interesting is that long before anyone had ever heard of Valentine's Day, mid-February was already a pretty big deal, but for a very different kind of festival. It was called Lupercalia, and it ran from February 13th to the 15th. If you read ancient writers like Plutarch, they describe it as this festival all about purification and fertility, and it was linked to the Roman god Faunus. Now, you got to be careful with some of the wild claims you see online about this, but what we do know for sure, what's historically solid, is that mid-February in Rome was already a time for rituals about fertility. That's a really important piece of the puzzle. Okay, so now let's bring in the man of the hour, Saint Valentine. And yes, he was a real person, a 3rd century Christian who was martyred during the Roman persecutions. But, and this is a huge but, the whole connection to romance, that's where the story gets really fuzzy. All those famous stories about him performing secret weddings or writing romantic letters, none of that is in the early historical records. That stuff was added way later. So the original Saint Valentine had pretty much nothing to do with romantic love. So you're probably wondering, if Saint Valentine wasn't about romance, then when did that whole angle get added in? Well, for that, we have to fast forward a bit, all the way to the Middle Ages. So around the 1400s, European culture started connecting mid-February to the idea of courtly love. And right around then, another very familiar character crashes the party, Cupid. And let's be super clear, Cupid is not a biblical figure. He is straight out of Roman mythology. He's the god of desire, basically their version of the Greek god Eros. He represents that impulsive, passionate kind of love. And before long, this little guy with a bow and arrow would pretty much become the mascot for the entire holiday. So there you have it. That's the formula for the modern holiday. You take the name of a Christian martyr, you mix in some romantic traditions from the Middle Ages, and then you wrap the whole thing up with imagery from a Greco-Roman god. Think about that for a second. There's a real irony there, isn't there? A day named for a Christian saint is now represented by a pagan god of desire. But how did we get from that strange historical mix to the massive commercial machine we have today? For that story, we need to look at the 1800s. That's when the script got a major rewrite, and this time, the writers were marketers. Fast forward to today, and Valentine's Day isn't just a tradition. Let's be honest, it's an industry, a huge one. We're talking billions with a B of dollars spent every single year on cards, candy, jewelry, you name it. And the message behind it all is subtle, but it's incredibly powerful. It's basically, if you really love them, you'll prove it. If you really care, you'll buy something. And there's that unspoken threat, right? If you don't do anything, it could look like you don't care. It's a direct line tying love to spending money.
And this creates such a fascinating contrast, doesn't it? The marketing version of love is all about this outward performance that requires you to spend money. But that's so different from older definitions of love. Love is something patient, faithful, sacrificial. It really makes you wonder, has commerce kind of hijacked our definition of what it means to show love?
Okay, so after all that, what are we supposed to do with this information? Well, the point here isn't to tell you celebrate or don't celebrate. It's really about giving you a framework so you can think it through for yourself. A lot of ancient wisdom traditions, the Bible included, give us principles for how to interact with the culture around us. And a big theme is basically, don't just blindly follow along. Think about it. And that's why really sincere people can look at all this history and come to totally different conclusions. Some will say, hey, it's just a harmless cultural thing now, while others might feel a little weird about its mixed up origins. The goal here isn't to push you one way or the other, it's just about being aware.
And I think this really gets to the heart of it. For most of us, celebrating Valentine's Day isn't some big, thought-out decision. It's just something we do because it's what we've always done. And that's how powerful traditions work, right? They stick around not because we've all examined them and agreed they're great, but just because they're familiar.
Which brings us to one last big question to chew on. When we're out there buying the flowers and following the script, are we genuinely celebrating something deep and meaningful? Or are we just kind of going through the motions of a habit we never really stopped to question? So the takeaway here isn't reject all tradition, not at all. It's investigate your traditions, because the things that influence us the most are often the things we just assume are normal. So stay curious and stay discerning.